The Carolina Panthers have been a bit of a roller coaster ride or a yo-yo team over the past few years. 2015, they go 15-1, make it to the Super Bowl, only for that to end in disappointment. 2016, they fail to make the playoffs, come crashing back down to earth a little bit. But then they rebound in 2017, win double-digit games, make it to the playoffs. They just can't beat the Saints. So you look at this team that still has the majority of that core intact with some playoff and championship level experience. You're saying, okay, maybe the Carolina Panthers can be in the mix in 2018. And they most certainly started off that way. It's hard to picture it now. You might not remember it. But the Carolina Panthers were once 6-2 halfway through the season. Like 6-2, meaning to the point where you're thinking about them potentially banging it out, not for a playoff spot, not even just for a divisional title in the NFC South, but potentially thinking about maybe a first-round bye in the playoffs, if not home field advantage. Like halfway through the season, that's what you're thinking about. Like this team's 6-2, they're rolling along pretty well. They'd really have to get hit by a truck in order to miss the playoffs. And man, oh man, did they hit that truck bad. It all started with that Thursday night game against the Steelers. It's like once they got taken to the woodshed and blown out by the Steelers, this team was cooked. They were done. It was over. I know it's easy to say that in retrospect now because you would have said, well, you're the road team, Thursday night game. You go in, you take your lumps, and you move on to the next week. This team just never seemed to move on. Like, once that seed of doubt was planted and other things started to happen, it went bad really, really quickly to the tune of a team that once started off 6-2, lost their in row. 7 games in a row to go from 6-2 to 6-9. That's crazy.
You would call that a collapse, a choke, and all of those things are absolutely true. And you wouldn't have thought halfway through the season there was any possibility at all of this happening, especially for a team that was 4th in the league in rushing yards a game, top 10 in total yards a game. You had Christian McCaffrey in year 2, run CMC, had over 1,900 all-purpose yards and 13 touchdowns. You know, the type of production you would expect out of a top 10 pick. That's exactly what you got. McCaffrey was a big-time player. You look at them defensively, they were kind of middle of the road, but they were good enough to be able to win more than they did. The real problem came down to, flat out, along with maybe Greg Olsen injury and some other problems, is Cam Newton just wasn't right. And you look at him in that offense, you're saying, well, man, he completed almost 68% of his passes. Something had to be going right. No, not really. When you looked at Cam Newton and you saw the amount of effort he had to put in order to make throws, it was clear, especially the second half of that season, that that shoulder was really, really bothering him. Hence why he had to have the off-season shoulder surgery. Like, he looked bad. He looked really, really bad. And sometimes you could tell when guys look bad and they are hurt because they make bad plays that they normally shouldn't make. Like Todd Gurley in the NFC Championship game. You could tell he was hurt. Something was bothering him at least because all of a sudden he's dropping passes that he wouldn't have dropped. Well, in this case, Cam Newton, his arm just wasn't the same, man. So, yeah, while you're sitting there and doing things to kind of mask that and be more conservative in your offensive approach and giving him more short, quick type of throws, and he's completing almost 68% of his passes, you just weren't getting the big plays out of him in the passing game that you live on. You weren't getting the type of explosive plays that you really needed. And a lot of that, again, had to do with Cam Newton had a bum sidearm. Exactly. His sidearm was not true. It absolutely was not. And you could tell, especially as the season wore down. That's why late in the year, he went in there as a starting quarterback. And just that's crazy to me how much one game can change an entire season. And ultimately, maybe they were just fooling themselves with that early season hot start. But man, once that Pittsburgh game happened, it felt like reality came crashing down in their face. It absolutely did. And I don't know what to make of what the Carolina Panthers are going to be next. In terms of this recent yo-yo, if anything, 2019 would point towards an upward trend. But now you've got Cam Newton coming off of surgery. You don't know how he's going to be. You have guys like Thomas Davis not returning. Ryan Khalil is retiring. Future first ballot Hall of Famer Julius Peppers is also retiring. So you have some key cogs, some key guys
on that team on both sides of the ball are not returning, and I'm not sure that they have effective replacements in-house on the roster right now. You look at this most recent draft class, you have a couple of guys you have some promise in. DJ Moore, Dante Jackson, maybe Rashawn Golden, Ian Thomas, Jermaine Carter. So you've got something there, but those are some big names: Thomas Davis, Julius Peppers, Ryan Khalil to lose and have to be tasked with replacing, especially when you have only a little over $23 million in cap space. And then you got to think about, are you going to re-sign guys like Mike Adams and Funchess and Eric Reed, maybe Chris Clark, Catanzaro? So this is not a team that you envision right now. Current state is going to be incredibly active in free agency because they just won't have the salary cap capital in order to do so. So how does this team get better? And really, will it even matter if Cam Newton's not right? Because so much of what this team does is built on the successes or failures of Cam Newton. And you can't have Cam Newton out there looking like he did in the second half of 2018 and expect very good things for 2019. Now, looking ahead to this team in the offseason, what are the biggest things they need, maybe particularly in the draft? I start in the trenches. To me, this should be a heavy, heavy trench draft for the Panthers. On the edges, defensively, they could use some pass rushing depth opposite of Mario Addison. Peppers is gone. You're going to have to replace that production, and you might need to address that multiple times in this draft. Then you look at the offensive line. I still feel like they could be better at the tackles. They could still be better on the interior, especially with Ryan Khalil not returning in 2019. They could use some help here, that's for sure. I still feel like they could use some upgrades at receiver, although I don't anticipate them spending a day 1 or day 2 pick on that position unless maybe they let Funchess go in free agency. And I don't see why the hell you would keep him, especially because you probably have to pay him way too much for way too little. I still feel like they could use an impact safety, one they don't feel they really have on this roster. I look at them, though, and I'm like, it's hard to know what this team is going to be going forward. What I do know is that this team had an opportunity. They were in position halfway through the year, and it just all came crumbling down. And if Cam Newton's not going to be right, then good luck to the Panthers in 2019. Ooh.